Your coverage is denied, the voice on the phone said flatly. Medicare determined these treatments are unnecessary. I set the phone down slowly. My hands went rigid around the receiver. The cardiologist's office had just called with news that made no sense. I'd been receiving cardiac monitoring for 18 months. My ejection fraction was 40%. My doctor ordered these sessions. Now they were saying I didn't need them. I was 62 years old and had spent my entire adult life paying into Medicare. I'd worked as a hospital administrator for 38 years. I understood how insurance worked. This didn't add up. The letter arrived 3 days later. Medicare had received a report from my family stating that my treatments were excessive and harmful to my mental health. The report claimed I was becoming dependent on medical care. It suggested I was a hypochondriac seeking attention through unnecessary procedures. I read the letter twice. Then a third time. My vision blurred around the edges. My son Marcus lived in Portland. My daughter-in-law Diane lived with him. My daughter Sophie lived 40 minutes away in Seattle with her husband. I hadn't mentioned my cardiac treatments to any of them recently. They barely called anymore. Marcus had been distant since his marriage 5 years ago. Sophie had sided with him on most family matters. I picked up my phone and called my cardiologist's office directly. The receptionist connected me with Dr. Chen after a brief hold. Dr. Chen, I need to understand what happened with my Medicare coverage, I said. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. Someone told them my treatments are unnecessary. I need to know who filed that report. Dr. Chen hesitated. I could hear papers shuffling on her end. Mrs. Elliott, the report came through our patient portal. It was filed by your son, Marcus Elliott, and your daughter, Sophie Chen Walsh. They listed themselves as your healthcare advocates. The room tilted. I reached for the kitchen counter to steady myself. I never authorized them as advocates, I said quietly. I have an advance directive. My sister Eleanor is my healthcare proxy. That's concerning, Dr. Chen said. According to our records, the advocate designation was filed online with a copy of what appeared to be your signature. I'd recommend contacting Medicare directly and reviewing your account. I thanked her and hung up. My coffee sat untouched on the counter, cold now. I stared at it without seeing it. Marcus had always been sensitive about money. When I'd helped him through graduate school, he'd resented it. When I'd co-signed his first mortgage, he'd treated it like an insult. Diane had made comments about my endless medical appointments at family dinners. I'd assumed she was joking. Sophie had been different until she married Robert. Now she echoed his opinions. Robert had always seemed uncomfortable around me. He'd made jokes about my health issues being all in my head. I opened my laptop and logged into my Medicare account. The changes were there in black and white. Marcus Elliott and Sophie Chen Walsh had been added as healthcare representatives with full authority over my medical records and coverage decisions. The authorization was dated 6 weeks ago. I had no memory of approving it. My heart rate accelerated. I could feel it in my chest. That irregular flutter I'd been monitoring for 18 months. The very symptom that had started this whole journey. I called Eleanor first. She was my older sister, a retired lawyer in Spokane. This is fraud, Eleanor said immediately. They accessed your Medicare account without authorization and filed false medical reports. That's identity theft combined with healthcare fraud. What do I do? I asked. First, change your Medicare password immediately. Then call Medicare's fraud line, file a police report. And Avarola, you need to talk to a lawyer. This is serious. I spent the next 3 hours on the phone with Medicare. I explained that I had not authorized the account changes. I described the false medical report. The representative was sympathetic but matter-of-fact. She restored my original healthcare proxy designation and removed Marcus and Sophie from my account. She provided me with a case number and the phone number for Medicare's Office of Inspector General. The police report came next. I drove to the precinct near my home in Tacoma. The officer, a woman named Detective Reeves, took careful notes as I explained everything. "Do you have copies of the authorization documents?" she asked. "Yes, they're in my Medicare account, but the signature doesn't look right. It's close, but the slant is different." Detective Reeves nodded. "We can have the documents examined, but I'll be honest with you, Mrs. Elliott. Proving intent is difficult in these cases. They could claim they were trying to help manage your health." "By lying to Medicare?" I said. "By filing false reports?" "Yes, that's fraud. But they might argue they genuinely believed the reports were accurate, that they were concerned about your health." I left the police station with a case number and a sick feeling in my stomach. I knew my children. I knew how they thought. They would have prepared a story. They would have framed this as concern for my well-being. That night, I called Eleanor again. "I need to understand why they did this," I told her. "It's not just about the money, is it? Medicare doesn't pay enough for them to care about that." "No," Eleanor agreed. "This is about control. If they can control your medical care, they control access to you. They control information about your health. They control your independence." "But why now?" I asked. "Why after 5 years of barely speaking to me?" Eleanor was quiet for a moment. "Did you recently change your will?" she asked. I hadn't told her. I'd updated my will 2 months ago. I'd reduced Marcus's inheritance by half and increased Sophie's by the same amount. I'd done it because I'd been thinking about my mortality. The cardiac issues had made me contemplate what would happen if something happened to me. I'd wanted to be fair to Sophie, who had always been more attentive, even if she'd been distant lately. I'd wanted to make sure my money went to people who would use it wisely. I'd told no one about the changes. "How did you know?" I asked Eleanor. "I didn't, but it makes sense. Marcus is in debt. His business has been struggling. Diane has expensive tastes. Sophie's marriage to Robert is rocky. He gambles. If they thought you were dying or becoming incompetent, they could move up the timeline. They could control your assets while you're still alive." The realization hit me like a physical blow. My own children had been trying to gaslight me into believing I was hypochondriac. They'd tried to cut off my medical care. They'd attempted to gain control of my healthcare decisions. And they'd done it because of money. I spent the next week gathering documentation. I printed every email, every Medicare statement, every medical record. I created a timeline. I consulted with Eleanor's recommended lawyer, a woman named Patricia Voss, who specialized in elder fraud cases. Patricia was direct in her assessment. "They've committed Medicare fraud and identity theft," she said. "The false medical reports are especially damaging. That's fraud against a federal program. The police report is important, but you should also file a complaint with the FBI's Internet Crime Complaint Center and with your state's attorney general." "Can I sue them?" I asked. "Civilly, yes. You can sue for damages related to the fraudulent account access and the false reports. But you need to understand something, Avarola. This will be public. Your children will know you're taking legal action. Your family will likely fracture further." I sat with that for a long moment. My family was already fractured. They'd fractured it themselves when they decided to commit fraud against their own mother. "I need to confront them first," I said. "I need to hear what they have to say." Patricia looked skeptical, but nodded. "If you do, don't accuse them directly. Don't show all your cards. See what they say. Let them reveal themselves." I called Marcus first. He answered on the third ring, which was unusual. He rarely answered my calls. "Hi, Mom," he said, His tone was cautious. Is everything okay? I need to talk to you about something, I said. Can you meet me for coffee tomorrow? Just you. Is this about Sophie? He asked quickly. Why would it be about Sophie? I asked. No reason. I mean, we've both been concerned about you, your health. We were just trying to help. There it was. The opening, the admission wrapped in concern. I'll meet you at the Riverside Cafe at 2 o'clock, I said. Just you, Marcus. He agreed, but his voice had changed. It had become tighter, more defensive. I spent the night preparing. I printed the Medicare statements. I printed the false medical report. I printed the fraudulent authorization documents. I put them in a folder and set it on my kitchen table. I didn't sleep. At 1:45 the next afternoon, I sat in a booth at the Riverside Cafe, the folder in front of me. Marcus arrived exactly at 2. He looked nervous. He'd lost weight since I'd last seen him. His hair was graying at the temples. He looked like a middle-aged man trying to hold on to something he'd already lost. He sat across from me and ordered coffee without meeting my eyes. What's this about? He asked. I opened the folder and slid the Medicare statement across the table. This is about you and Sophie committing fraud against Medicare, I said quietly. This is about you filing a false medical report claiming I'm receiving unnecessary treatment. This is about you and Sophie accessing my Medicare account without authorization. Marcus's face went white. He looked at the documents like they might bite him. Mom, we were just trying to help, he said. Your medical bills are enormous. We thought maybe some of the treatments weren't necessary. We were concerned about you spending all your money on health care. You lied to Medicare, I said. You forged my authorization. You filed false reports about my medical condition. We didn't forge anything, Marcus said. His voice had taken on a desperate edge. We thought you'd given us access. Diane said she'd talk to you about it. You're lying, I said flatly. You know you're lying, and I know why you did it. Marcus stood up abruptly. The coffee cup rattled in its saucer. This is ridiculous, he said. We were trying to help you, and you're treating us like criminals. That's exactly what you are, I said. I've filed a police report. I've filed a complaint with the FBI. I've hired a lawyer. You've committed federal crimes. The color drained from Marcus's face. He looked around the cafe as if suddenly aware that other people might be listening. You're going to prosecute your own son? He asked. His voice was barely above a whisper. I'm going to hold you accountable, I said. Just like I should have held you accountable for every other lie and manipulation you've perpetrated since you married Diane. Marcus left without another word. He didn't pay for his coffee. I did, and I left the folder on the table for him to take if he wanted it. He didn't come back for it. I called Sophie next. She was defensive from the moment she heard my voice. Marcus called me, she said. He said you're threatening to prosecute us. That's insane, Mom. We were helping you. You committed fraud, I said. You filed false medical reports. You accessed my accounts without authorization. We didn't access anything without authorization, Sophie said. Her voice had taken on a sharp edge. We filled out a form. We didn't know it was wrong. You knew, I said. You both knew exactly what you were doing. You were trying to cut off my medical care so you could gain control of my health care decisions and my assets. That's not true, Sophie said, but her voice wavered. Then explain why you did it, I said. Explain to me why you and Marcus and Diane decided to commit fraud against your own mother. Sophie didn't answer. I could hear her breathing on the other end of the line. I updated my will, I continued. 2 months ago, I reduced Marcus's inheritance and increased yours? I thought you deserved more because you seemed more responsible. But now I understand. You're all the same. You're all willing to hurt me for money. Mom, that's not... Sophie started. I hung up. The next week was a blur of legal documents and phone calls. Patricia filed the civil lawsuit on my behalf. The police investigation moved forward. The FBI opened a case. Medicare sent me a formal apology and restored my full coverage, backdating it to the time the false report had been filed. I also did something else. I called my bank and my financial advisor. I transferred the majority of my assets into a trust with Eleanor as trustee. I updated my will again, this time leaving everything to Charity and to Eleanor. I left Marcus and Sophie each $5,000 with a note. This is enough to start over, if you choose to. Marcus called me 3 days later. His voice was hollow. Mom, please don't do this. We made a mistake. We're sorry. You're sorry you got caught, I said. Not sorry for what you did. That's not fair, he said. No, I agreed. What's not fair is that I spent 62 years of my life raising you, supporting you, believing in you. What's not fair is that you tried to destroy my health and steal my independence because you wanted money faster. I hung up and blocked his number. Sophie didn't call. Robert called instead, his voice smooth and apologetic, asking if we could discuss this situation without involving lawyers. I told him the lawyers were already involved and hung up on him too. The trial date was set for 14 months away. During that time, I did something I hadn't done in years. I lived for myself. I traveled. I visited Eleanor in Spokane for a month. I took a cruise to Alaska. I volunteered at the hospital where I'd worked, mentoring younger administrators. I made new friends. I joined a book club. I started painting, something I'd loved in my 20s, but abandoned when life got too busy. My cardiac condition stabilized. Dr. Chen adjusted my medications. I continued my monitoring treatments. My health improved steadily, probably because the stress of my family's betrayal was finally gone. The trial was surreal. I sat in a courtroom and listened as a prosecutor explained what my children had done. Medicare fraud, identity theft, filing false reports with a federal agency. The evidence was overwhelming. The documentation was clear. Marcus and Sophie's lawyer tried to paint it as a misunderstanding, as children concerned about their mother's health and spending. But the prosecutor presented the timeline, the will change, the sudden interest in my health care, the coordinated effort between Marcus, Sophie, and Diane, the forged authorization documents. The judge found them guilty on all counts. Marcus received 18 months in federal prison and a $50,000 fine. Sophie received 12 months and a $30,000 fine. Diane, who'd orchestrated much of it, received 2 years and a $75,000 fine. I felt nothing when the verdict was read. No satisfaction, no vindication. Just a hollow emptiness where my family used to be. Eleanor put her hand on my shoulder as we left the courtroom. It's over, she said. No, I said. It's not. It's just different now. A year after the trial, I was living in a new house. I'd sold the home where I'd raised Marcus and Sophie. Too many memories lived in those walls. The new house was smaller, on the water, with a view of the Puget Sound. Eleanor helped me decorate it. We painted the walls soft blues and greens. We filled it with art and books and light. I'd been promoted to a consulting role at the hospital, which allowed me to work part-time while still contributing. My cardiac condition was stable. My doctor said my prognosis was excellent if I continued with my treatments. I continued with my treatments. I didn't hear from Marcus or Sophie. They'd both moved after the trial. Marcus had relocated to Colorado. Sophie had divorced Robert and moved to California. I didn't know if they were together or apart. I didn't ask Eleanor to find out. Some doors, once closed, should stay closed. But I thought about them sometimes. I thought about the moment when they decided that their financial needs were more important than their mother's health and independence. I thought about the calculation that must have gone into their decision. I thought about what it meant that they'd been willing to lie to a federal agency to achieve their goals. And I understood something that I hadn't understood before. Love isn't automatic. Family isn't automatic. Just because someone shares your blood doesn't mean they'll treat you with kindness or honesty. Just because someone is your child doesn't mean they won't hurt you. The hardest part wasn't the fraud or the trial or the legal battles. The hardest part was accepting that the people I'd spent my life loving had chosen to hurt me. That they'd chosen money over integrity. That they'd chosen control over compassion. But I'd survived it. I'd documented it. I'd held them accountable. And I'd rebuilt my life into something better than what I'd had before. Today, I wake up in my house by the water. I take my cardiac medications. I check my email for messages from Eleanor or my friends from book club. I don't check for messages from Marcus or Sophie because there won't be any. I've accepted that. I've learned that protecting yourself isn't selfish. Standing up for yourself isn't cruel. Holding people accountable, even when they're family, isn't betrayal. It's survival. And survival, I've discovered, is enough. If you or someone you know is experiencing healthcare fraud or financial exploitation by family members, contact your state's Attorney General or the FBI's Internet Crime Complaint Center immediately. Hit follow if this hit close to home.